learn to be polite like that.
It's interesting that I had the chance to see the video, so I've seen you before.
That's right.
It's a great.
They're nationally famous now.
And especially when you're gonna tell me, what was that last part of the thing I have to do about the world? How they gonna set the world on fire?
How you gonna change the world? That's right, absolutely, absolutely.
Let's give up.
Okay, so let me do a more formal introduction for Dr. Ellis. My notes from his CV. So Ed Ellis was a master's student at North Carolina.
Don't forget Shaw University.
Excuse me, that is right.
Yeah, dear old Shaw.
So,
There you go.
so maybe I should let you give your introduction. No, seriously, because you'll do a better job. And rather than people don't want to hear me now, they want to hear you. So why don't you tell us, just if you would, very briefly, you were born in Franklin County.
Oh, okay.
You grew up in Raleigh,
All right.
and we'll take it from there.
I'm a country boy, right out of Franklin County, Lewisburg, North Carolina, where I was born. And I used to tease my parents because all this was happening during the Great Migration of blacks from north and the south to the north. And my parents decided that they were going to migrate from Lewisburg, North Carolina, where I was born, in Franklin County. But the only problem was they didn't have enough money to get them there, so they wound up in Raleigh. So we set roots in Raleigh. And that's where I grew up back in the day. And mother had a great influence on me. She taught me two things. One was of a religious nature and one was of a civil rights nature. And she started with religion first, and she said, there is a God. She believed in that. And that God will help you. And she made sure that we believed in it, because she kept us in church about 7 days a week. I mean, if it had been 8 days, it would have been 8 days a week. And then she said the civil rights message. Now, mind you, she is saying this to me in the 30s and the 40s. You got to get an education. You have to get it up here. And when you get it up here, the man can't take that away from you. Now, think about what was going on in the era of the 20s, the 30s. And who is the man? I don't need to tell you. But that was her way of expressing to her son, you're going to face the issues of discrimination and other issues related to that. And you got to deal with it. And the only way to deal with it is to have the right mindset and get as much education as you can. She said, but first, since tomorrow is Sunday, you get ready for Sunday school. And you're going to stay there for the 11 o'clock service. And we're going back for the young people's thing at 6 o'clock. And then on Tuesday, you're going to Loyal to Boys Club at the church, like the pastor's wife. And on Wednesday, you're going with me to prayer meeting. On Friday, we'll see what's there. And on Saturday, I went in and I had a job. I helped clean up the main sanctuary of the church, and I made exactly 25 cents for doing that. And I turned around the next day on Sunday and gave it right back to the church. And the way I could pay my dues. So I made how I got started. Probably will hear some more of this as we go along. Thank you for the opportunity.
So you went to Shaw and got your, well, excuse me, so you went into the Navy
Yes, yes,
for 3 years.
yes, yes. This was, of course, during the Second World War. And I did not volunteer. I was drafted at 18 years old. I did not request the Navy. In fact, I didn't request anything. They just told me where I was going. Most folks were going in the Army, but I guess I got lucky, got the Navy. And the first time I'd ever been on a train was a train from Raleigh, North Carolina to Chicago, Illinois, because the Great Lakes Naval Facility was near Chicago, where I was to do my basic training. Back then we called it boot training, basic training. And that was my first time seeing the big city. But I want to tell you, the route that this train took us through a part of Chicago that showed the dilapidated areas of that city. And I said to myself, this is the big city. That was my first view of the big city. But I'll move on. I wound up in the Navy, had good training, what they call boot camp. At that time, this was following at the beginning of the Second World War, during the Second World War. If you were in the Navy prior to the Second World War, you worked in the kitchen and other menial duties. But in 1943, they decided to test all of the recruits, and based on the testing, we were assigned to certain segments of the Navy. I don't know what I made on the test, but I was assigned to the health arena. And I became what they called a hospital corpsman or a pharmacist mate. My job was to work in health settings to assist nurses and physicians and other health personnel as they would take care of naval personnel in the hospital. There was a naval hospital located at the Great Lakes training facility. And I had an opportunity after school to work in that naval hospital. And then after that, I was assigned to work in one of the camps. The phrase boot camp, you know what I'm talking about, where you're training? We worked in the training camp. And we were in the dispensary. And we provided health care for all the young men who were coming into the Navy to be trained to be part of that, to be part of the Navy. And we reported to a physician who was available at all times to help us. Otherwise, we made appropriate health decisions based on our own knowledge. And then I thought I had the best duty in the world. And in fact, they even assigned me to go on trips when they would transport naval personnel, say from Great Lakes after training, to a facility on the West Coast or somewhere in Florida. They would use troop trains, and they would always have to have a hospital corpsman on that troop train. And that was the best duty in the world. I could get out of that Navy camp and get on the train, taking these guys to wherever they were going, especially California. I'd never been to California before. And so I remember one troop train experience. Let me back up. When you go into basic training, and after basic training, you're given a leave of absence for about a week or so. And then you come back, and that's when you are sent out to the university. Well, got on this troop train, headed to San Diego, and I tell you, sailors started coming down with, gonorrhea. And gave out a medication. We gave out a medication before we even got to Salt Lake City. And once we got to Salt Lake City, they gave us enough to get us to San Diego. And then when we got to San Diego, we had to take them right to the check-in point and to the dispensary. Communicable disease. You know which one I'm talking about. Was a factor. But then the good part of that trip was that the Navy would always give you a couple of extra days to spend in the city of your designation. So I had a couple of days in San Diego, California. You know about a country boy out of North Carolina. It was the best thing in my life going on there. But anyway, that was a part of the tradition there. And then,
Could you just clarify something for me?
yeah.
So on these trains that you were providing the hospital, of course, with the pharmacy service for, were the sailors white or black or mixed or?
Black. They were not mixed at that time. They were not mixed.
And they were not, I mean, you didn't provide care to whites either?
No, not at that time. Even though we were in the Navy, the Navy had not gotten to a point where they had training for both races together. They had two camps at Great Lakes, Illinois, Camp Smalls and Camp Lawrence, that were devoted strictly for blacks. Other camps were non-blacks. And so I'm on a troop train with nothing but black.
And Navy was the last one to integrate.
Navy was.
Yeah, they were a piece of work.
In fact, the first officers ever in the U.S. Navy occurred while I was at Great Lakes. And this was in 1943. They commissioned 12 ensigns on that occasion. That was a historic moment.
Right.
In the U.S. Navy.
Right.
It never happened before.
Right. Started, and one man, Dorsey Miller.
Yes.
At Pearl Harbor.
That's right.
It wasn't,
That's
he,
right. That's
he
right.
raised the question.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And what he did, outstanding.
Yes, absolutely.
But, and you see, the other part of it, as I mentioned earlier, if you went into the Navy, you were going into the mess hall. You know what the mess hall is, dining hall, the dining room, kitchen. So we were lucky and got into hospital corps, and as a result, had the opportunity to work in a dispensary setting in a boot camp or a training camp. And also, after that, I was then reassigned to the U.S. Marine Corps. The Navy provides health services for the Marine Corps, and they also provided religious services. So chaplains and health personnel for the Marine Corps provided by the Navy. And I was shipped to Camp Lejeune here in North Carolina. I don't know how many of you have heard of the history of Camp Lejeune, but check it out, because it was at Camp Lejeune that for the first time the Marine Corps admitted blacks, and they were trained at Camp Lejeune and then dispensed all over the world. And I was assigned to a group that was sort of a depot-like group, and we went first to California, then from there to the Solomon Islands. You're too young to know about the Battle of Guadalcanal. I won't bother you with that, but anyway, that's where that battle was fought. And we were there after the battle. change the hour.
I'm going to move us forward a little bit so we can
Okay.
be sure to get, but, so there's more on this topic on the interview. But when you got out of the Navy, then the question was, what would you do? And you decided to go to college.
I decided to go to college. And, you ever heard of a thing like called the GI Bill? All right, well, I decided to take advantage of the GI Bill. And it's in a way, it was good because if I had not gone into service, I don't know if I'd be sitting here today talking with you, because that was the thing that got me going in respect. Even though I stayed on a few blocks from the school that I went to Shaw University. I was telling them earlier that Shaw was really my first love, but it was my second choice for going to school. I had applied to Howard University. Now, back in that day, you couldn't apply to a great university like this university. So I applied to Howard, and Howard accepted me. I applied to the College of Arts and Sciences, and my letter of acceptance came back saying, "We're pleased to admit you to the College of Architecture." I said, no, I think we're going to make that mistake at this point in time. I don't think I want to go there. And so I walked up to the street a few blocks and applied to Shaw, Shaw University.
And you majored in biology.
Majored in biology with a lot of social sciences in there, and just kind of mixed things up because I didn't know which way I was going. I was interested in the health field because of my training in the Navy. The interest was there. And so that's how I got here. I majored in biology. But then I wound up in a master's program at North Carolina Central University, which then was called North Carolina College. Before that, it was called North Carolina College for Negroes. Before that, it was called something else. You see how we've progressed over the years. And interesting thing about the public health program at North Carolina College, you may or may not know about this, but it was a program in public health education started by the faculty here at UNC. It was Dr. Lucy Morgan who was director of that program in collaboration with the president of North Carolina Central University. Made the decision, and of course Dr. Morgan had the blessings of the leadership here, to design and to present the same public health education curriculum at the master's level at North Carolina Central, and that started in the mid-40s. I went there in the class of 1949-50. I'm going to mention another name will come up later, Bill Darity, Dr. Darity. Dr. Darity and I were classmates at Shaw. He graduated from Shaw a year earlier than I did. He graduated in 48. He went to that central program. I graduated in 49, and I went to that central program.
Was he from North Carolina?
Yes, yes. Bill was from the western part of the state, up in Boone Mountain or someplace up there in the hills of western. Yeah. Next time you talk to him, tell him to bring you up to date on.
I will. I hope to do an interview with him. Actually, I really hope I can do one.
Yeah. But we were classmates here in the doctoral program in public health education. So.
But so you got your degree from Central, your master's degree, MSPH, and then you looked for a job in health education in North Carolina.
Yes, and I looked and I looked and I looked. Here's the issue, the problem. Because of segregation, blacks could only work in the black community. So health departments, health agencies did not have enough funds to hire 2 health educators. one working in the black community and one working in the non-black community. They did have enough funds to hire one who could work in both communities, and I don't need to tell you which one they could hire. So that was life then. And I was sharing with them earlier, my roots were here. I know all the problems and issues, but I wanted to be a part of dealing with those issues, and I wanted to stay in North Carolina. And I was trying my best to get a job here. I got my public health degree in 1950, and it was 1951 before I got my first job. So I spent a year in Raleigh. I did work a little while with the Cancer Society. They had some funds for a little summer project that I worked on. Dr. Morgan at that time was head of the program, able to get me a position with the county health department in the public school system, where I worked with the health department in the black community and in the black schools. We did a little school health education with the teachers in the black school. And that was it. And so even though I wanted to stay in my hometown, I thought at one other job, you know, even though I'm walking around with a master's degree in my pocket, I found myself working at a supermarket that had just opened up in Cameron Village Shopping Center, putting groceries in bags. And then also, I found myself one day, well, not one day, but a few weeks, I became the most outstanding refrigerator cleaner that you will ever see in your life. Because I cleaned a warehouse full of refrigerators. And I was thinking, the truth of the matter is, I wanted to stay in North Carolina. But obviously, that did not work out. And so my first job in public health was a job with the District of Columbia Tuberculosis Association. And I worked with that group for an organization for about 3 years. And I recall sharing with kids that as students in the program in Central, we used to talk about what the future would be like, what we would be interested in. And one of the things that we set as a goal is that if we could just find a job, and if we ever got to we'll find a job first, but if we ever got to a point where we made $5,000 a year, we would have it made. Can you imagine? But teachers were making $2,000 a year. And we said, we'll have it made. So the first full-time job I got was in Washington, D.C., $3,600 a year. I'm getting close. Left North Carolina, left good old North Carolina, and went right to the nation's capital. I got there at a, well, I think who was big then, Eisenhower was president. I even went to see his inaugural parade. But, so my first job was in the Tuberculosis Association, Washington, D.C. And you know about the $5,000 goal that we set, as I mentioned here earlier? The state of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State Health Department, advertising the need for health educators to work in the Pennsylvania State Health Department. Salary, $5,500 You know who was the first to apply? I had to take a civil service exam. I said, well, yeah, I did this. I said, I know I got the ace of this one. Anyway, make a long story short, I went to Pennsylvania as a health educator in the state health department. It reached the ultimate. Now, if you thought about anybody thinking today about reaching the ultimate at $5,000, they'd be crazy, wouldn't they? They'd get out of your mind. But that was life.
It was worth more.
That was, it was, you're right.
I want to be sure we cover some of the later parts of your career too. So you worked for the Pennsylvania State Health Department, and then you went into academia.
Yes, I left, when I left Washington to go to the Pennsylvania State Health Department. And it was while I was at the Pennsylvania State Health Department that I got a 2-year leave of absence to study toward my doctorate here at Chapel Hill. And Bill Darity and I arrived at the same time. We were kind of out of contact with each other. We didn't know that we were going to be students until we both showed up on campus for the doctoral program in health education. And that was in, what did I say, 61. And I spent 2 years here, and we got our degrees in 64. Bill got his in June of 64, and I got mine in August of 64. I think that would make Bill you know what I'm thinking, it would make Bill the first black I know to get a PhD in public health here. And I'm sure he was the first black to get a PhD at UNC. Mm-hmm. And if there wasn't anyone between June and August, then I was the second one at UNC and in the School of Public Health. That was the history behind.
So what was the school like?
Yes, that first day, first of all, that first day. So you come to Chapel Hill.
Yeah. But you know what? It's interesting. Two dynamics here. By being in the public health profession, and by having both, the online, and by having the contact with Dr. Morgan, the master's level at Central. There was a very good relationship that we had with Dr. Morgan and the faculty in public health education, which I know played an important part in this role. And so it was based on that and the fact that we had the credentials. We were admitted, we had to go through the same admission process as everyone else, that we were admitted to the program. It was not a point where Bill and I decided hey, let's you and I check out the UNC. We just decided to apply about the same time. And so we both wound up here at this great institution. Now, I said that to say, since we have been working in public health, we knew the faculty here because of our previous experiences at Central, because of our interactions at the American Public Health Association and in other health settings around the country. So it was not a couple of strangers coming into a department where there was no knowledge of each other at all. We had that now. We were strangers to everybody else at UNC Chapel Hill. Okay? And we had some interesting occasions and some interesting times. I recall one of the things that jumped out in my mind. Usually you would expect universities, when they're moving in the direction of doing what Chapel Hill had to do, and that is to integrate, would in fact make sure that everybody knew what was going on. And you know, what we're doing, it's part of our culture now. We're going to admit that would be blacks, it would be admitted. Now, I think that that might have been the case with some of the professors, people, those at higher levels. But the interesting thing that Bill and I ran into was not from non-black students when we showed up, but he and I showed up at a cafeteria on this campus. And we're in the cafeteria line. And behind the line are several young black ladies who were waiting on people who come through that line. And the university had not prepared these young ladies for the fact that there will be some folks, or there may be some people coming in this line who are the same color as you. And they saw us and honestly did not know what to do. Here, for the first time, they're looking up to put some food on a tray, and it is not the faces that they have been seeing. And they were literally stunned and stunned. But Bill, a swift talker, and I'm trying to keep up with him. We assured those young ladies everything is all right.
This was before the sittings in Chapel Hill, right?
That's right.
This was still, Chapel Hill was still fully segregated.
Yes, still fully segregated. And we had to introduce, you know, okay, sister, brother. But then the other thing about it is that the funny part of it is that some when our white colleagues would go to eat lunch with the same place, they looking out, they said, why do you and Bill get so much food and we don't get take care of us? But you know, I used to try to make a joke out of it, but it gets to the seriousness of what an institution needs to do with all of its people as it makes changes in the way it handles things, in the way that people admits what it's going to do. You wouldn't expect that. Now, I recall that in a couple of academic settings, Bill Darren's wife was very active in the community. And the kinds of things that were going on campus, whenever there was a demonstration, you know, And Bill and I were in a social structure class. I think it was Prof's name now. Anyway, outstanding professor. And he made a mistake one day in his social structure class of saying something about what was going on in Chapel Hill and about this Negro woman who was involved in this. And Bill Darren stopped him and said, that Negro woman happens to be my wife. That discussion stopped right there. Then, as we proceeded through the course of the study, he's a great instructor. He knew what he was doing in social structure. I didn't see too much in there on blacks except the bottom. So my final paper that I wrote for him was dealing with the social structure of the black community. I don't know if he'd ever thought about it before. But I aced him. He came back, he stopped me one day. He said, you know, he said, you've got an outstanding paper. I've given you an H, which means A. He said, you know one thing? I think I ought to include some of this in my future course. Now I feel, here I have convinced the great one that he still has some territory to cover in his course of social structure. So I think we had an impact in that respect. By and large, now you have to, let me back up and just share one thing with you. I was not on this campus day and night like most students are. See, I really commuted from Durham because I brought my family back from Pennsylvania with me. The little story there is that we decided that I would try to work on my doctorate and that I would go back to Chapel Hill, and my wife and I decided, well, maybe I'll go down the first year by myself and we'll see how things work out. And the family will join us, you know. And so she said, well, okay, we do. I said, well, let's discuss it with the kids. And my youngest was about 4 or 5 years old. And said, well, Dad is going to go down to Chapel Hill, and this is what our plan is. And second, if things work out, if he passes and all that, we'll get together. You know? And the young one said, if Dad goes, I go. It changed all those plans. So I said, well, we all go. And so we literally packed up and moved to Durham. But now, we're only moving 26 miles from home. So that was the good part about it. And it worked out well for us. And so I commuted between Durham and Chapel Hill. Another little tidbit. Stop me when I get to going. I went to a football game. No problem. I sat on, I don't know what side of the field it was on, but I was right there, integrated. I was in